Hey there, it's Tom Jordan. So nice to have you. Hope you had a great weekend. It's certification day. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. Some other headlines with Justin Trudeau maybe resigning today, and also this new oil ban, gas ban by none other than the current president, Joe Biden. But I want to talk about this because there is a new fight going on. Actually, I don't think it's a new fight. It's been going on for quite some time. And what is a little bit different now is that race is being used as leverage for one side to win this battle over the H1B Visa Program. New words like Hindu phobia are developing as many foreign workers in Silicon Valley, for example, are from India, and many of them are Hindus. So if you don't like the fact that your job is being replaced by foreign workers, you're suddenly suffering from Hindu phobia, is now the new argument. I think people are disillusioned to this, thankfully so. But we're going to talk about this today. H1B. It's this massive divide now within even Donald Trump's circle. Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy are huge proponents of using the program to bring skilled workers to the United States. We don't have enough, they say. And if their businesses are going to survive, we need to import more workers through this immigration program. But critics are saying, listen, the foreign worker program is preventing local graduates and skilled professionals from getting jobs. So we're going to look at Michigan's labor market today. The critics are saying it's like, listen, this is being hollowed out, the labor market in the state of Michigan. This is just one example, by this relentless addiction to cheap foreign labor, which is enabled by this program, the H-1B Visa Program. And so James David Dickson is going to join me in a few seconds. He's going to talk about, for every foreign worker that is brought in, I love the way he phrases it, at a discount, a local graduate or a skilled professional is either passed over or forced to leave the state entirely. And it's nothing that's really new. Michigan has had this, what they call a brain drain, and a real, what they call a talent gap in the state that is probably the state that's most impacted by globalization. So we're going to talk about all that. James David Dickson, you know him. He's a great journalist. We're going to dive into this issue with him, the journalist, the reporter, the columnist, and host of the Enjoyer podcast, James David Dickson, in just a few seconds from right now. Just a reminder, though, to chime in. I want to hear from you. We want to hear your comments. You can ask questions to me or to James as well. Go into the comments section of YouTube or X or Facebook, wherever you're watching this right now. And I'll get to those in a moment, and we'll pose those to James David Dickson as well. Also, just a reminder that we're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcast as well. It's a daily program, weekdays, 9 a.m. streaming, but it lives in perpetuity, as I like to say, on those platforms as well. Also, the best way you can help Tom Jordan Live is simply to subscribe, click the notification bell, and share the video, the content, if you like it, if you think it's worthy to be shared. And to share it to your enemies as well. If they disagree with me, great, that's fine. We're all into that whole dialogue is what we want to have. Okay, so I talked last week about Michigan's population decline, that residents are fleeing the state along with their jobs and their businesses, but there is an increase in the foreign population in Michigan. So the state ranks 49th in the country, second worst in the country in population growth. The growth in population that it does have in Michigan is almost entirely by international migration. So you look at between 2020 and 2024, Michigan lost about 68,000 domestic residents, while the international migrants added about 165,000. Okay, so we're not opposed to migrants here. That's not what we're saying here. But there is a stark contrast that's underscoring a bigger issue here. There is an exodus of families and workers fleeing the state of Michigan and going elsewhere where there's more opportunity. Not other countries, but other states. And why are they going there? So what that means is that every year, thousands of Michigan's young and talented graduates leave the state in search of better opportunities, often because local companies are prioritizing cheap foreign labor over investing homegrown talent. And it's exposing a whole slew of issues here. Like, why is there a lack of talent in Michigan and really in the entire country? But why is it happening so demonstrably in the state of Michigan? And companies are saving a ton of money doing this. And with Michigan becoming an ever increasingly more expensive place to live and more difficult place to run a business, the state's skilled workforce is taking off because of H1B visas, allowing these large corporations to use contractors to then hire foreign workers at a huge savings. We're talking like 20 to 30% savings for these companies. So, okay, let's talk about this. The host of the Enjoyer podcast, none other than James David Dickson. James, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming back on the program.
Happy New Year, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Happy New Year. And I'm looking forward to 2025. I think it's going to be a very, very interesting year. This is one of the issues that already kicking off, actually ending 2024, came up. And there's already seemingly this divide within the Trump circle regarding this particular program. You got Donald Trump,
Right.
who's a businessman. You got Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, who are businessmen. So they're looking at from that perspective that, hey, we need to not only keep the H-1B visa program in effect, but we need to expand it in order to bring more immigrants to fill these jobs that we can't fill in this country. So if you could just start off with kind of a background, a backdrop of this issue in what is the H-1B visa program, and is it a positive, is it a negative for this country?
Yeah. So basically, over the last 30, 35 years, we've had this H1B program, I think since 1991. Michigan got in, from what I can see, like 20 years later, 2011. And so basically, the idea is it's this way to get high skilled foreign labor, the kind of people America doesn't want to do without, to be able to come over to America. And so it's a 3-year visa. And so, um, right now we have 12. Last year we have 12,000 people, 11,600. But over the life of the program, that's 181,000 people who've been
Hmm.
brought over on these visas. And my concern is when I see a company like Whirlpool, for instance, um, when they're hiring for a senior software engineer, they go through this third party company, Atos Centel. That's one of the top users. So we have the 12,000 this year. This one company has like 500 of those. And what they do is they match them up with companies like Whirlpool all over the state and all over the country. And so you'll see jobs posted where it's like $70,000 for a senior software engineer at Whirlpool headquarters in Benton Harbor. 75,000 for senior software engineers in Atlanta and Nashville. There's no way anyone in the tech industry is making those low of wages in those kind of markets, but for foreign labor.
Hmm.
So if the software engineer actually is senior, that person would be making 120K, 150K in some markets. And if they're not senior, that could be a new college graduate who's working their way up. And so we're told that these workers are supposedly indispensable. I would challenge that. I would ask this: is there a such thing as the IT guy that America can't live without?
Hmm.
And I
Let me
think if
ask
you
you
hear
this.
that question, the answer is clearly no, right?
No, you have to have that. That's a necessity in today's just
I mean, you
not
need
just
you
in
need
business,
an
but in
IT
education,
guy,
pretty
but
much everything we use.
but the IT guy from India that America just we can't miss him.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist.
So you brought up some very concerning numbers. So I'll repeat them again because you said that Michigan, since the life of this program that we've adopted, the H-1B visa program in 2011,
Right.
we've lost, the state of Michigan has over 181,000 jobs to those foreign workers, basically bypassing the Michigan bred, Michigan trained, Michigan educated workers. And that's since 2011. Last year alone, you said 11,600 workers were imported from other countries just last year. So
Right.
how can, in your view, or maybe it can't, how can Michigan continue this reliance on foreign labor, and how can it be justified with thousands of local graduates being forced to leave the state and find opportunities elsewhere?
You know, Tom, it's incredible. We have this media. I worked at the Detroit News for 10 years.
Hmm.
And for 10 years, we had stories every year about, oh my God, Michigan has this terrible brain drain. And
Hmm.
then the same people would do stories about how Michigan has this incredible talent gap. And to not see the two as the same thing, as two sides of the same problem, is ridiculous. And it just shows kind of the failure of the mainstream media. So they're really good at putting raw information out there, but they're really poor at connecting these dots and seeing what's obvious if you just think it through for a moment. So we have 6,000 college graduates leaving per year. Why are we bringing in 12,000 people? We need to build a wall around Michigan, not just to keep people out, but to keep our college grads home.
Yeah.
And so Michigan, you talked about the population loss, and here's what makes this a problem, and here's what makes it replacement. So you lose two types of people in Michigan, three types of people, but two in particular are big losses. Recent college grads with that degree hot off the printer. It's still hot in their hand. You actually aren't supposed to hold it right in your hand when it's freshly printed. You have to, that's why they give it to you in a folder. And so they leave with these freshly printed degrees, and they leave Michigan with their potential, but also with your family's future. And so every parent who has to send their kid off to New York or San Francisco or DC, you're moving your kid, chances are, to a city that you can't afford to visit regularly, or let alone move to. And then when they get used to that lifestyle, they might not want to move back, which means instead of having what I had, which is I lived in Inkster and my grandma lived on the other side of Inkster and, picked us up from school every day. And some of my best memories involve my grandma. Well, there's a lot of people in Michigan seeing theirs twice a year as we import the labor we supposedly can't do without. Guys, we fell for the okie doke. The good news is we can change.
Yeah, we sure can. And that brings up a whole nother issue, is this deprioritization of the family and the family structure, because what you just
Yes.
described there is something that we don't see very often and less frequently in the state of Michigan. I grew up in California, where that was the case, where you didn't, your grandma or grandfather lived somewhere else in Michigan or in Arizona, not in California. So you were, there was a deprioritization of the family out there, and that's happening in the state of Michigan. We're becoming more and more like California, a state that I fled for all these reasons. But you brought up the whole brain drain issue, and then the talent gap issue, and why there is not this connection there. There is a disconnect. And we've seen all these press conferences over the
Right.
past 10, 15 years of Mackinac Island. Now, and, even with Rick
Absolutely.
Snyder, we got to fix the talent gap
Oh,
issue. The
we interviewed the
MEDC's coming
governor on
in.
the porch of the Grand Hotel. Yeah.
Yes, many times. And Governor Gretchen Whitmer, she's got this, what is it, the blue ribbon panel. We're going to fix this issue.
Oh,
But it
yeah.
only gets worse and worse. So are they not making the connection? And if they're not, and if you and I can make the connection, are they purposefully not making the connection? Because we just saw another example. I forget which district is now in Michigan, where they're getting rid of any type of standards for teachers. You don't have to have this outcome for your students, and we're not going to judge you based on how you're teaching your students this way or whatnot. It's like
Yeah.
they're making the education system worse, and they're still crying about we need to fix the talent gap. So is this a purposeful thing? Because it doesn't take much, common sense. Again, you and I can do this to figure out there is a connection right there.
The purpose of a system is what it does. And Michigan is under a system-wide degrowth right now. And so think about it. We decide that we should trade away our prosperity, the thing that brought my family here and so many families here, the auto industry. Let's just give that away. Let's just send those jobs to Mexico or China or southern states, wherever we can pay workers less and don't have to deal with the UAW. And I admit the UAW is a pain in the butt. It's extremely corrupt. What I would say is, what did we learn during COVID, right? When America needed all these ventilators. Did you want those to come from China? Or were you relieved when you heard that Ford Motor Company, the one that put the world on wheels, the one that was the arsenal of democracy during World War II, they can build tanks when America needs them, they can build ventilators when America needs them, and otherwise they build F-150s because America buys them. That's
Right.
who you want to do business
Yes.
with. And
Right.
so even companies like Ford, I think about a century ago, Henry Ford wants to build electric vehicles, he hires Thomas Edison. Bill Ford, when he wants to build EV batteries, calls up Xi Jinping and partners with a Chinese company in Marshall.
Yeah. Scary.
What is going on? Ford is the most important company in America in terms of its historical impact. I mean, Henry Ford was the father of my hometown, Inkster. There's a lot of people who can trace their ability to put food on the table in Michigan to Henry Ford. And even they are part of the problem. They're actually, I believe they were the biggest user of H1Bs, 600 such workers. Now imagine if that was 600 more kids who had the opportunity to work at Henry Ford headquarters in Dearborn.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they do buy that downtown loft for a few years until they buy that home in the suburbs. That's the kind of thing that would lift all ships.
Yep.
Importing foreign workers is the easy option, and it doesn't necessarily lift America, because where do a lot of those workers send their money? Back home.
Yeah, I want to bring this up because you started off making this very important point that these third parties are stepping in here and they're finding the workers for these large companies.
Right.
You mentioned Whirlpool in Benton Harbor and the schools in Benton Harbor, which should be a kind of a feeder system into Whirlpool, and Whirlpool should be working with the educational system in Benton Harbor. But they're struggling, the schools are, to connect their graduates to these local opportunities, while the Michigan companies are using these third parties to hire people elsewhere, and not when I say elsewhere, I don't mean just in Ohio or Indiana. I mean out of this country. So, can you explain the system? I mean, these third party companies who are coming in and doing this, are they completely bypassing the domestic worker in order to go overseas?
Yes, I mean this Atos Centel, they're a huge company, and they've been one of the consistent top users of the program. It's basically a pipeline for Indian workers to get to Michigan and to get to America. And so that's what I find so disturbing about it. When you look at the tweets of Vivek Ramaswamy or Sri Thanadar, the congressman in Detroit of Indian descent, he's not even of Indian descent, he's just Indian. And when you look at their tweets, they're very comfortable with a nativism that benefits the people of India. And if we're not just as comfortable saying Americans need to be at the front of these lines, because what the H1B program is, we were told that this is a program, high achievers by any means necessary. It's not. There's actually an O1 visa for that. That's not H1B. This is tech workers for cheap. And so what did we do to Dad? We passed NAFTA. We sent his job away. We deindustrialized Detroit. When I was a kid, Detroit was the Motor City. Now it's kind of just Motown again, right? It's music, it's culture. But even the Detroit papers will call the big three the Detroit Three. They'll use the Japanese propaganda line to diminish their importance. So we have to learn within our own hearts and souls to value our neighbors and the people of Michigan. I would rather my neighbor be overpaid to work as a senior engineer at Whirlpool or Ford or GM than to be undercut by foreigners who are not invested in this country. I have no problem saying that.
James, what do you make of people when they respond to what you just said as, okay, well, that's a racist comment to say, there's this term out there now called Hindu phobia as it relates to the H1B visa program, because the vast majority of foreign workers who were getting from overseas are from India, and many of them are of the Hindu religion. So they're trying to correlate and make this argument again that if you oppose H1B visa programs, you're a racist. How do you respond to that complaint?
You can call me whatever you want. Just don't call me late for dinner. I don't care. Like Hindu phobia, that's not a thing. So if you want to make a charge of racism and for it to work, there has to be an affinity for the group that's making the charge, right? So if this was Native Americans talking, you probably feel sorry for them because of what was done historically. Like basically these people came to your continent and they had more powerful weapons and they overtook you. Sucks, but we all get it, right? But you do feel sorry for the loser in that situation. If there's black people, you look at the history books and you say, okay, I get that a little bit too. We don't want to be doing that kind of thing. Anti-Semitism, right? It goes back to the book of Exodus in
Mm-hmm.
the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So you feel sorry for those groups, or you feel affinity to those groups. When you're talking about people from the country of India, you don't feel anything. It's not that I have anything against you. I just don't have anything for you,
Hmm.
including jobs,
Yeah.
including sympathy,
Yeah.
including a
You're pointing
willingness
out
to
to like
back
a
down rather
yeah.
than tell the truth about what's happening, including a willingness to prefer you over American people. That's just never going to happen. I live at 10 Mile and Telegraph in Southfield. Put up a billboard with the stuff I'm saying, and all you'll do is grow my following.
Mm-hmm.
So try me. Try
Yeah.
me.
Well, I think they've seen this tactic work so many times in the past, and they're trying it again when it comes to wanting to get this passed. Is there any truth? And then I'm going to take some comments because we have some people that want to ask you questions. But is there any truth, do you think, to Elon Musk's and Vivek Ramaswamy's statement that they have to import foreign workers because if they don't, their companies and others like their companies will fail and will not be able to compete with these foreign entities in other countries. Any truth to that?
So, I was blessed. I record this in my late mother's basement. I've turned it into a podcasting studio. And one of the many lessons my mom taught me when I'd be whining about something in my life, oh, my room's too messy and I have to clean it, or I'm behind in homework and have to do it, she would remind me that sounds like a personal problem to me.
Hmm.
Now, if these things were true, if Elon Musk's company just wouldn't be able to go on but for talented enough workers, and you said, I'm going to deny you the easy way of getting them, I'm going to deny you this pipeline of cheaper workers, what would such a company do? It just shows how our media has become part of the problem in America.
Mm-hmm.
When I was covering the presidential campaign, I covered a J.D. Vance rally at Eastern Market in Detroit. And, J.D. said a lot of interesting stuff, but the Detroit newspapers, the Detroit News, the Free Press, they were there for specific reasons. They came in with their angles pre-written, and what they wanted basically was to get J.D. Vance to say that the government should not oppose a $500 million grant for General Motors to build EVs.
Mm-hmm.
If
Yeah.
you think that one of the biggest companies on earth just couldn't do something that would be good for business because they can't get $500 million from the federal government, then
Mm-hmm.
you've been misled about the nature of economics,
Mm-hmm.
business, human nature, just history.
Well, I don't think they've
You've
studied
been
it, to be honest with you.
misled.
Well, they've been
And so it's the
misled
same
because they
thing
don't
here.
study the historicity of those issues and what the free market
Yes,
really means. These are not the best and brightest in
they're not.
the media landscape nowadays. And the best and brightest have gone to do other things. Like now you're doing the podcast, and during the campaign, you worked for the New York Post. I mean, people know you're excellent at what you do, but the opportunities are few and far between because I do agree with you that the media is corrupt and they're now beholden to these globalists out there and that mentality and that ideology, which I want to touch on in a second here, the
Yeah.
globalism and how that's impacting
Oh,
Michigan.
yeah.
But first, I want to take some comments here. We're going to
Awesome.
bring up two or three, and we'll start with Harry Sekelian. Hi, Tom. Hi, Harry. Please ask Mr. Dixon if he thinks Michigan's degrowth plan has a political agenda. Makes no sense to me. Thanks, Harry. Yeah, what do you think? Is this all political?
Of
What's the
course,
end
it's
game?
political. Uh, the end game is to dismantle the Michigan economy, what has made Michigan great. The end game is the weakening and destabilizing of America.
Mm-hmm.
Another word I have no problem saying is communism.
Mm-hmm.
This stuff is communism.
Yep.
Okay? Michigan, if nothing changes in the next, 15 years, we're going to be running a state on solar panels and windmills in 2040.
Mm-hmm.
So that's stupid. That's something you'd only do in a cold state if you wanted there to be less economic activity. Dana Nessel, our Attorney General, is the biggest opponent of the Line 5 pipeline, which basically gives life to the entire lower peninsula.
Mm-hmm.
It's our oil and gas pipeline. No serious person would do that, but Dana Nessel does it. And what they would all say is, hey, if you have to do with less, then you just have to figure it out. Governor Whitmer cuts down 400 acres of forest in Gaylord to put up solar panels. So we're destroying the environment to protect the environment.
Right.
The purpose of a system is what it does. Everything Democrats do at every turn makes Michigan dumber, weaker, and poorer. These aren't mistakes. This is what they want done. Because guess who leaves? Every year, more people like you and me leave.
Yeah.
When you know, and a lot of times, either you're forced to do it because of the economy, or you just feel hopeless, like it can't be fixed. That's why 2026, that election is going to be so important. Because if Democrats run the state for another 8 years, there's not going to be a Michigan in 8 years.
You nailed it, and that's exactly how I feel too. This is a Marxist ideology to destroy the state and destroy this country. And each of those people you just mentioned, the Dana Nessel, the Gretchen Whitmers, they've all been trained by people like the Soros family and Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum. They are bought into this Marxist ideology and globalism to devalue this country and to make us less successful and others more successful. It's this division and, critical theory that they've been perpetuating now throughout our country that's becoming more popular through academia and whatnot. So you're absolutely right. That is the end game. So, Harry, it's a great question and a great answer by James.
Can I point out one example of this?
Yeah.
2022, Whitmer partners with the World Economic Forum for a Center for Advanced Manufacturing.
Yeah.
We partner with a Swiss nonprofit that only produces white papers for a center on manufacturing, the same place that wants to take 75% of cars off the road by 2050. Is that good for the auto industry or bad?
And they want to take the money from prosperous nations and give them to other countries who are not as prosperous. That's part of their plan at the World Economic Forum. Let's bring up another comment here, or a question. I'm not sure what it is yet. It is from Curious People. I haven't heard of Curious People before, but I'm glad you're curious people. A lot of Americans can't find jobs right now is because of hiring average H1B instead of O1. I'm not sure what that is, but it's true that a lot of Americans cannot find. Do you understand that?
Yeah. O1 is what they tell you H1B is. They tell you H1B is about the best and brightest, but if we actually need an Elon Musk, you can give him an O1, and we can get the people we need. So that's the Mott and Bailey they've pulled. They talk about H1Bs as if they're O1s, then they bring a slew of, quite frankly, middling IT guys to America and present them. They're trans indispensable. They identify as indispensable. That's not actually true, but it's how they identify, and it's how they're identified. And we're all to play along with the fiction.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Good. Thanks for that explanation. It's a good comment. It is true. We're treating these foreign workers as if they're indispensable. We have to have them, and it's good for this country if they come over here. They will save our state. They will save our economy. They will help all of us get jobs out there when the exact opposite is occurring right before our very eyes. We can. I've talked to a lot of college graduates who said, "I can't get a job right now," and I was told 4 years ago that if I majored in engineering, that I was guaranteed a job, and now nobody's hiring me because they're going overseas.
We told them that STEM would be your key to prosperity.
Yes.
And so your dad was just he worked with his hands and his body, and that the world moved past that. And that's very sad, but the world's not changing, right? Even though those jobs do exist elsewhere with workers who are paid less. So son says, great, I get it. I'm not going to do what dad did. I'm going to take all the STEM classes. I'm going to get that serious degree. I'm not going to do gender studies or underwater basket weaving. But then you find that you've been replaced too, just like dad was. And now you have to realize it wasn't that dad was wrong. It's not that you're wrong. It's that the most powerful people in your state and your country want you replaced with cheaper foreigners. And so that those 11,600 people, what if that was 7,000 Michigan people making real wages?
It's sad to me.
Trade-off.
Yeah, and the whole like replacement theory a few years back, and that the media was very NBC and ABC and CBS, the Detroit News, the Detroit Free Press, all
Oh
the
yeah.
local, they were all in on this. That replacement theory is some white supremacist conspiracy theory that's out there, and none of this is happening. There's no crisis at the border. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are not letting all these people in here to take your jobs
Mm-hmm.
or to get their
Mm-hmm.
votes. Not none of that is happening. When it is happening now, and we can all see it now. In fact, some of the most prominent Democrats are now admitting, even like guys like Chris Matthews from the former MSNBC guy, far left liberal, is now saying, why in the world did all the Democrats allow for all these millions of people to come across our border and pretend it wasn't happening the entire time? And I look back at Chris Matthews and say, what do you mean all of them? It was you too. You
You.
were all in on this, ignoring the crisis at the border, saying that it's a manufactured crisis. And we all know it wasn't, but now they're looking in hindsight, realizing that the American people, for the better part of them, I think, are disillusioned to this false narrative that they've been gobbling down now for years and years, and are, as we said earlier, the chickens are coming home to roost, and the Democrats have, many of them have no option, but the smart ones at least, to admit that they have been deceiving the American people for far too long.
The Democrats should really study history. They should study economics. They should study something other than the tactics of Marxism,
Hmm.
because these lessons in the humanities would really help them.
Yes.
Abraham Lincoln would have told them, "You can't fool all the people all the time.
Mm.
You're
Yeah.
transing our entire country. You're bringing in illegals and saying they're as good as Americans.
Yes.
You're
All
bringing
right. We need to
in
give them benefits.
H1Bs and telling them that they're smarter than Americans.
Yeah.
You're telling us all these obvious lies. You're telling us
Yeah.
that the border's just fine. You're telling us that Biden is sane and stable. You're telling us that Kamala Harris works hard and doesn't have a drinking problem. You're telling us all these obvious lies that we can see with our eyes. And think about in 2020, Hunter Biden, that laptop would have
Hmm.
been Hillary Clinton's emails times 20,
Yeah.
if not for every attempt of the media and social media coming together to suppress a story. The whole media like snuffed out the grenade before it could
Hmm.
explode.
Yeah.
That's not what the media does. And
Hmm.
so I think about my time at the New York Post when we would have scoops on Alyssa Sloan, doesn't pay property taxes. She's a fake farmer. She broke up a 25-year military marriage just to dump the guy on the eve of her Senate campaign. All these factual, true things that could be researched and found out. The Detroit papers never followed up on those stories
Mm. Yeah,
because they're
all
out of
those
the
things
truth
that you just
business. They're
mentioned
in
there,
the
and Alyssa
advocacy
Sloan is this great
business.
example, Exhibit A,
Yeah.
of how deceived we have been, and she's a master at this, and she's got, I mean, she does call, she'll talk to reporters, and she'll intimidate them, and if they don't fall in line, there's going to be hell to pay, essentially, or she's not going to come on their program. She did that to me. There's this famous, debate audio where she was chastising the moderator because he wasn't friendly enough to her, didn't
Tim
follow the
Skubic, I
rules.
think he was. Yeah, Tim Skubic is a
Yeah,
known ass kisser in Michigan, and he apparently did not kiss enough ass.
yeah,
It's like that you missed a spot, right? And
yeah.
so that was the heart of her complaint. I think about Alyssa Slotkin in her first campaign back in
Hmm.
Michigan,
Yeah.
2018, which was
Hmm.
also, by the way, the first time Alyssa Slotkin voted in Michigan was
Mm.
for herself. So that's gross. Before she had any power, though, she's coming out of this event that she just held, and there's a tracker there asking her questions. I guess Republicans wanted to get her on the record saying that she wanted to do Medicare for all, and she was going to join the Medicare for all caucus. And so this tracker keeps asking her the question, and the group falls off and fades off, and finally at the end, it's just Slotkin and this tracker. She's getting into her car. He asked one last time, "Will you join the Medicare for all caucus?" And Slotkin says, "How are Sloan and Leroy?"
Hmm.
Sloan and Leroy are the names of his dogs,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
was not common knowledge. So,
No.
which means she not only knows the tracker's name, she has enough info on him to know the names of his dogs. Clearly,
That's
one of
so.
these tricks. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
I
before she had any official power.
right. She is a CIA data analyst, formerly. I've saw that video too, and there's so much about her that is so, I would say, scary and very concerning. And that initial 2018 campaign she ran against Mike Bishop was one of I mean, she succeeded heavily in deceiving the majority of voters in Michigan in a conservative district that Mike Bishop did something he never did. And she used her own mother to manipulate the population in the state of Michigan. She's very savvy in this, and she comes across as this nice mother, farmer, homemaker, smart CIA data analyst who is bipartisan, and she's nothing of the sort.
None of it's true.
Yeah, none of it is true. You're right about that. I've known people who served with her in Iraq, and there's a lot of things about that service that she probably would not want out there. And I'm not going to bring it up. I'm not saying that's not an intimidate. I'm not doing what she does. I'm not threatening to do anything of that sort. But yeah, that thing about the dogs was pretty concerning, and it shows the inner workings of an Alyssa Sloan mindset that most
Yeah, Alyssa,
Michiganders should be
how's
aware
Chad,
of.
by the way, Alyssa? Yeah, tell us about how Chad is, and
Yeah.
we'll get back. Yeah, we'll get back.
Hey, James David Dickson, it's always a pleasure. I love reading your stuff. I love your podcast. By the way, congratulations on it. It's the Enjoyer
Thank you.
podcast.
Thank you.
And people, I mean, he's one of the most proliferate writers on X as well. And I love your comments. Some of it's personal, some of it's very apropos to what you do for a living is journalism. So continued great success, my friend. Thanks for coming back on. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate you.
You got it. Thank you so much. Yeah, Enjoyer podcast. And, it's all part of this Enjoyer. You should go to, I think it's enjoyer.com. There's michiganenjoyer.com as well. James David Dickson, one of the guys you can trust out there to tell you the truth. And he gets pushback, just like a lot of us who end up doing what we want to do is just speak the truth about some things that we're covering and researching that much now the legacy mainstream media will not cover because somehow there's some thumb on them that's preventing them from even having the curiosity at the least to find out a little bit more about this individual who seems to be telling you something untruthful. So I appreciate his work very much. There's this issue with the H1B visas, and it's exposing something that's been a problem for quite some time, but it's gotten worse over the past few years, and that is America's educational collapse. It is a crisis of our own making. And, the last week's squabble over the H-1B visas, they didn't just ruffle feathers, in my view. It ripped the Band-Aid off this festering wound that is the demise of education in the United States. American students are not prepared for technical fields. And why would they be? 2 years of school closures turned classrooms into Zoom purgatories, with education being replaced by compliance checks, DEI initiatives, which have hollowed out the academic standards, prioritizing ideology over intellect. And the result has been a generation which is struggling to meet the most basic of benchmarks. And if you think that's exaggeration or hyperbole, look no further than New Jersey. In New Jersey, the proficiency exams there for teachers were just scrapped. They got rid of them. The people shaping young minds are no longer required to prove they have functioning ones. The irony would be funny if it weren't catastrophic. And what's happening in New Jersey has happened in the state of Michigan. It's happened in the state of California. I believe it's a result of two things. One, union dominance and union power. So the unions are there only for one sole purpose. That's not to educate your kids. Is to make sure that teachers make more and more money and are never fired so that the unions can continue to line their pocketbooks and they can continue to make huge profits. They are the ones in control. So there's that. And there's the other issue that James and I just talked about. That is the Marxist goal and endgame of destroying the foundations of this country, state by state, prosecutor by prosecutor, governor by governor, policy by policy. And that's what they're doing over and over again. And there's tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars being spent just to do that. So the pandemic, it was just one great example of how Marxism works. Scare people into compliance. So the pandemic, it didn't just disrupt the educational system. It exposed the decay when we're specifically talking about education. Schools weren't built to withstand the storm. They were already crumbling before COVID. You got TikTok, you got Instagram, you got pharmacies worth of psych drugs that have done the rest, have dumbed down our society and have distracted us. leaving many kids with attention spans that are shorter than the school day that they're skipping and don't want to go back to. So what is the solution here? It's not more federal funding or another union contract. We have plenty of money to educate the kids in this country. The unions already have enough power to control the legislators who are developing these school curriculums. They're writing them themselves. We have to have a radical rethinking of priorities. Parents, take control of your kids' education. You got to reimagine your own households. This might be controversial because it goes against what the mainstream narrative is, that freedom means both parents working in the workforce, never being at home, putting your kids in childcare, which the government will pay for with higher taxes. No, let's rethink it. Maybe smaller households, smaller homes, fewer luxuries, more time focused on faith and family and your community. Homeschooling is actually a good thing. You've been told the opposite. Homeschooling, what we're told is homeschoolers are dumb, they're not being educated. That's not what's happening. In fact, I know plenty of young kids who have learned the alphabet, their ABCs, all that, prior to nursery school because their parents taught them. So when they get to kindergarten and first grade, they're already well ahead of all the other students starting off because they're not teaching them the ABCs. Many of them can't even read at third grade level in fourth grade. Homeschooling is actually quite good, so maybe rethink that. Look into it. Private alternatives. Disciplined learning. These are not any longer like fringe options or extremist positions. They're lifeboats for your child's future. And this shift isn't easy. It demands some sacrifice. That's what we do as parents, right? Discipline. The courage to swim against the current of a culture that glorifies convenience and consumerism. But for those who make that leap, the reward is priceless. Children equipped not just to survive, but to thrive throughout their lifetime. And then you get to watch your grandkids do the same thing because you've broken the cycle in your own family. You've made that separation from the way you've been told you have to do things, only to watch it time and again not work out. You've broken the cycle. Said, I'm going to do things differently this time around. Whether you're a father or your mother, whatever it is. So watch out, be very careful. The defenders of the status quo, they're going to complain harshly. They're going to push back hardcore against anyone who goes against their narrative because it's very profitable. And they believe in this ideology so much, almost to the point of death. I mean, this is how they think. So they're going to blame COVID for we had to shut down the schools because this was a novel virus. It was a worldwide pandemic. We had no choice. Oh, you had plenty of choices, and you chose what you wanted to choose, and you chose wrong. They blame politicians or anyone else in the vicinity, but history is going to be unflinching in its judgment of what happens in our lives, in our families. The lockdowns we saw, the mandates, the DEI-fueled mediocrity, it didn't just harm education. It accelerated education's collapse and is harming our society. The question now is simple. Are we going to stand by and just watch and wait for it to happen again? Or are we, as parents or individual citizens of this great country, are we going to rebuild our own lives the way that we see fit? It's the future of America, really. It's the future of American education. And it depends very much so on the answer to that, how we approach it. So my encouragement is for you to refocus on the things that matter in your life. You don't have to have 3 cars in a 4-car garage, a little side for more storage for all your goodies. You can downsize and have a much happier life as well. All right, I think we have another comment. I want to take that, and then I'll get to some headlines here in just a second. Let's bring up the comment if we could. Cameron Harris is always watching those comments for us here at Tom Jordan Live. This is Steve Damascio. Man is making excellent points. If you can't build things, whatever that may be, you don't have a sovereign country. You're right, Steve. Yeah, think about how America used to be this place. He brought up, Henry Ford and how we used to build things. In World War II, we became the arsenal of democracy. And the airport down at Willow Run here in Ypsilanti was where we were building these B-52 bombers because Ford and General Motors and these great car companies got into it. They were American-made products to defend America. And we've gotten away from that. So we need to get back to it. And that's not helping with this HB1 visa program because these are no longer, many of them are not American made. And if they are American made, we're importing foreign workers to do it. Again, I'm not opposed to immigration whatsoever. But if you're doing it and you're sacrificing skilled workers and very smart people in this country in order to take someone else, and that's not right. It's just not right. All right, Steve, thanks so much for that. Cameron, do you say we had one more comment? We got two more. Okay, let's bring them up here, and then we'll get to headlines one by one. This next one is from Taz is back. Hey, Taz, how are you? It doesn't make sense. I would believe the H1B proponents more if they had the same passion for improving our own education system that they claim fail to provide domestic talent. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Why are we giving up? Yeah, I think the answer is yes, we are giving up because we're getting rid of standards in order to make sure that we have schools that are truly educating our children. Let's go back. Let's double down. We don't need more, another $30 billion in Michigan to make sure our schools are able to teach because all that money is going seemingly elsewhere. And it's not funding the basics of education. I've already told you, I've seen time and again where little kids are learning their ABCs at home only to see that they're well advanced once they get into the school system because the schools are not teaching them properly. There are great teachers out there. I'm not saying that's the case. But by and large, we're behind. And we're getting rid of standards to ensure that we actually could one day become ahead of the rest. Thanks so much for that. Good to see you again, Taz. Let's bring up one more here. R. Paulus is back. Hi, R. Paulus. H1B reminds of the circumstances that American capitalism had to go offshore to survive. Yes, it's true. We had to export a lot of our, manufacturing to other countries, and that was, I think, a direct result of the overly eager and oppressive government regulations that chased corporations out of town, essentially, effectively, out of America. And you see these other see Michigan, great companies in Michigan are leaving the state of Michigan. Stellantis, formerly Chrysler, wants to leave Michigan and go elsewhere. Why? Because of the overregulation of the current Michigan power structure. So, yeah, thanks for that. Appreciate it so much. All right, let's get to some headlines here. Today's a big day. Today is January 6th. Remember that day? What you probably hear a lot today is a lot of talk about what happened 4 years ago. But we are watching today what's happening today as the nation watches. Congress is preparing to certify the 2024 presidential election results, and today the House and the Senate will convene this joint session of Congress to certify the 2024 presidential election results with heightened security. Boy, that would be good if we had that 4 years ago. And that does reflect the event's, transformed nature since 2021. This used to be kind of an event that just kind of went, you did it and you went away. But it was once unremarkable, right? The process has now become a national security affair because we got 10-foot fences now surrounding the Capitol, barriers extending well beyond Capitol Square, marking that stark contrast to the open accessibility of years past. So what's going to be unusual here, maybe a bit awkward, is that Vice President Kamala Harris will be presiding as president of the Senate, facing this historic irony, certifying her own defeat. And this ritual, it's rooted in the 12th Amendment. You got to do this. And it's played out before. Richard Nixon and Al Gore both performed the solemn duty when they had to kind of announce their own defeat and certify the election results. And it just underscores the resilience of the American political system. Kamala Harris will share the dais with House Speaker Mike Johnson, who represents the GOP and newly energized GOP and Congress under Donald Trump's leadership. Now, back to 2020. The contentious certification there that really transpired on 2021. And by the way, I will never say that was an insurrection because it wasn't. The FBI, even their investigation said these are a bunch of splinter groups who got out of hand. It was a protest that got out of hand, and it did become violent. But it was not an armed insurrection like the media keeps saying it was. And I'm not going to honor that day or pay the respects and homage that the Democratic Party has for all these years since 2021 to pretend there was an attempted coup that had occurred. No one has ever come down, and there's been no court that has ever said that there's been no charge that has shown that, and the claim that Donald Trump is an insurrectionist is bogus. He's never been charged with that. And I even have people today tell me, you're wrong, Tom. The courts have charged Donald Trump with insurrection. They have ruled that he's an insurrectionist. No, they did not. And that is, I'm not going to say it's a lie because it seems harsh, but it's just not true. Maybe you're a little ignorant on that fact and on that matter. But in any case, and by the way, in this certification today, there have already been Democrats who saying we should not certify this election of Donald Trump, seemingly not recognizing their total hypocrisy, that they want to overturn the will of the people because they don't like Donald Trump. And in their mind, he's the one that orchestrated this, months-long preparation of January 6, 2021. No one found him to be that to be the case. And that's not no investigation has proven that at all whatsoever. In fact, Donald Trump, back to the security issue, is the one who said we need to make sure there is more security on January 6, 2021. And he was rebuffed time and again. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, the people in charge of security said, no, we're not going to do that. Others as well. So they didn't do it, and we saw what happened. So clearly Donald Trump did not want that to occur. It did. It was bad. It was chaotic, but it was not an insurrection. So back to today. Today's current January 6th. The results from this past election. There's no real significant dispute. There's been some Democrats who say they don't want to certify it. Other Democrats, including Jamie Raskin from Maryland, refused to certify Donald Trump's first election back in 2017. That doesn't get brought up very much by the media. He was on the January 6th Select Committee, by the way, saying that not certifying the election was unpatriotic and, it was this attempted coup. Anyway, so recent updates to the Electoral Count, the Electoral Count Act. They updated it, and it explicitly limits the vice president's role to a more of a ceremonial one, which closes loopholes exploited apparently in these past challenges. As tellers begin reading state-by-state results, Harris will declare Trump the winner, bringing closure to a contentious election cycle. And Capitol Police are there. They're anticipating a quiet session, which, of course, would be a marked departure from January 6, 2021. So there's that. All right, that's today. Other big news today, Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, that guy right there, he's reportedly about to resign amongst his political turmoil up north, up in Canada. The Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, reportedly preparing to step down. It might happen today, on this Monday, which is a dramatic shift in the nation's political landscape. There were sources cited by what's known as the Globe, the publication, and the Mail, indicate that Justin Trudeau's resignation could precede a critical Liberal Party caucus meeting, which is coming up on Wednesday in Canada. So this signals the end of his decade-long tenure as the leader of the party there. He's been in office for a long time, and he was once celebrated for his progressive vision. And progressivism, of course, necessarily, and always does, leads to a higher cost of living and inflation through the roof. And all these things are mounting, all these challenges in his own country. And they're like, we don't like this. I mean, there's a housing crisis in Canada that is incredible. You think that housing crisis in the United States is bad. It's far worse up there. They got a very sluggish economy. Economic growth is horrific in Canada. Soaring inflation, as I mentioned. And the public doesn't trust Justin Trudeau. I don't know why it took him so long, but they don't trust him. I didn't trust him years ago. There is a recent poll that's put out by Angus Reid. The Angus Reid poll reveals that he's got a 68% disapproval rating. Justin Trudeau does. Only 28% of Canadians still are in his corner right there. Such a nice guy. He got away with so much stuff over the years because he's so charming, that man is. Remember, he's had an ally, the finance minister there. She resigned in December. And that was like, okay, that is the beginning of the end of Justin Trudeau, because if she's out, then he's going to be out very, very soon. This looming no confidence motion that was put in place, he prevailed against that, but for the new Democratic Party leader, put that forward as well. So there's a lot that's been going against Justin Trudeau. So we might see that come down today. We'll be watching, and if it does, of course, we'll bring it up on social media, or we'll just, of course, talk about it tomorrow. Also, so it's anyway, probably the end of Justin Trudeau's reign, and I hope this is a reversal of the way that Canada has been running their country for so long. Very progressive, and very Marxist in their ideology, and hopefully this is the beginning of the end of that ideology up north in Canada. All right, to Joe Biden, offshore drilling ban sparking outrage just before he leaves office, and the Trump campaign says, no, we're going to reverse this ban on offshore drilling. So President Joe Biden, he announced a sweeping ban on offshore oil and gas drilling, which is going to restrict development across 625 million acres of ocean, including vast areas off the east and the west coasts, parts of the Gulf of Mexico, and Alaska's Bering Sea. And the decision was hailed as a victory by environmentalists, but has drawn fierce criticism from energy advocates and former President Donald Trump's team and his, I should say, President-elect Donald Trump's team. Joe Biden framed this move as essential to his climate agenda and a commitment to conserving 30% of U.S. lands and waters by 2030. And, you cite the 2010 Deepwater Horizon disaster. That was horrible. You're right. Biden claimed it is not worth the risk to drill in these regions, citing public health and environmental dangers. But Donald Trump's spokeswoman, Caroline Leavitt, she fired back, labeling this decision disgraceful and accusing Joe Biden of political vengeance. And she declared, "We will drill, baby. We will drill," is what she said. Drill, baby, drill. Underscoring Donald Trump's pledge to restore energy independence through expanded domestic drilling. You've got to drill if you're going to have a secure country. This is a national security issue. And in colder states like the one I'm sitting in right now, where it's very cold outside, in the state of Michigan, energy is essential. And it's essential for everyone as well. It's not convenient. We have a society that relies completely on energy. You're not going to go to work. You're not going to be able to work if your energy goes out. So that's just one example. And the cost of living is going to go through the roof unless we get back to drilling in this country. So industry leaders said that they were condemning this move by Joe Biden. It's a blow to America energy security. American Petroleum Institute President Mike Summers urged Congress to reverse what he called a politically motivated decision. In the meantime, Biden's action, rooted in the Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act, creates legal hurdles for a swift reversal. This might be a challenge. And this sets the stage for this fierce policy battle over America's energy futures. So we got a slim majority, the Republicans do in the House. We got a majority in the Senate. And we have the Oval Office. We'll see how this plays out. Always on it for you here at Tom Jordan Live, our team here. So we want to thank you for being a part of it and for chiming in, for your comments and great questions today. Thank you so much. Thanks to my guest, James David Dickson. You can catch him, his Enjoyer podcast, MichiganEnjoyer.com, I believe is where you can find him. And follow him on X, James David Dickson. We'll be back here tomorrow for another great program, Tom Jordan Live. Follow us at TomJordanLive.com. You can go to Patreon as well, Tom Jordan Live, or follow Tom Jordan Live on YouTube, on X, on Facebook, on Spotify, and on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much. God bless you. We'll see you back here tomorrow.